Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever it is, wherever you are. Richard Fulmer here, and welcome to another Richard's Rock Rambles, albums that are 50 years old in 2022. So today's band, the album we're going to look at, in fact, was done very sort of tongue-in-cheek. Their previous album, called Aqualung, was called the concept album by many, including the music press. In fact, it wasn't. There was a slight theme in it to do with religion, but Ian Anderson, the leader of Jethro Tull, yes, that's the band we're talking about, said that was never meant to be a concept album, and he got a bit perturbed with all these guys calling it a concept album. So they thought, right, next album we release is going to be the mother of all concept albums. But being English and being the way he is, it was done with a lot of humor involved. It was sort of a fictional story. It came with a whole fold-out newspaper in the original vinyl. And it turned out to be probably one of the best concept albums of all time, although it was done as a joke. And it was actually the first real progressive rock album from Jethro Tull. You know, they started out as a blues band, then they had some sort of hard rock, folk kind of leanings, but this was their first true progressive rock album. They'd make quite a few after this, actually. Minstrel in the Gallery was another one. So yeah, this is a great album called Thick as a Brick. I just love that title. And it only consists of 2 tracks, both quite lengthy. So there's a whole lot of different parts to it. That's why I say it's a progressive rock album for them. So the album was recorded at Morgan Studios in London in December 1971 and released on the 3rd of March 1972. There's so many great albums that came out in 72. I just wish I'd been a little older to really appreciate the stuff. But nevertheless, it was on the label Chrysalis. They were with Chrysalis label for quite a number of years, and produced by Ian Anderson and Terry Ellis. I think Terry Ellis had something to do with the Chrysalis label. Ian Anderson preferred to produce Jethro Tull's albums. He was he liked to be in control in the studio. He was pretty much in control of everything that Jethro Tull did. Many years later, he would release a solo album, which was kind of a follow-on from Thick as a Brick. There is a 2012 40th anniversary edition, which is a remix by Stephen Wilson, famously from Porcupine Tree, and contains a CD, a DVD, and a book. I don't have that one. The one I have is a 25th anniversary edition that came out in 1997. So who was in the band at the time? Obviously, it was Ian Anderson on vocals, acoustic guitar, flute, violin, trumpet, saxophone, and accordion. Yeah, the only thing that's not there is the kitchen sink. Martin Barr on electric guitar, lute, and flute. So he also played the flute. John Evan on piano, organ, and harpsichord. Jeffrey Hammond on bass guitar, or as he was otherwise known, Jeffrey Hammond. I don't know why they added the extra Hammond, but in any case. Barrymore Barlow, and this would be Barrymore Barlow's first album with the band, and he would go on for quite a few albums. For me, the best drummer that Jethro Tull ever had. Not that the other guys weren't good. He would replace Clive Bunker, who was on Aqualung, the previous album. He'd left the band and Barrymore Barlow came in. So he was there on drums, percussion, and timpani. Excellent drummer. Really knew how to work his way around a kit. If you listen to their live album called Bursting Out, you'll see just how good he was. And also featured David Palmer on orchestral arrangements, who would later on become a member of the band. He's now known as D. Palmer because David Palmer had a bit of a sex change, and so he's now D instead of David, but that's another story. So the album did really well, and it actually reached number 1 on the Billboard 200 in 1972. And you know, for a concept album which is quite quirky and typical English humor, you'd think that would never get to 1, but hey, at this time, Jethro Tull were flying quite high, along with Zeppelin, Sabbath, Purple, and all those other great bands. The early 70s was a sort of a golden period for Jethro Tull. So let's have a look at this album. There we go. That's the iconic cover, Thick as a Brick. And That's the back. And this 1997 25th anniversary edition actually comes out with a replica of the newspaper that came out with the original vinyl, which was a 12-page newspaper. So this is a slightly smaller version, but I thought it was really cool to get. And there's all sorts of strange stories. So this is supposed to look like an English newspaper, you know, with all sorts of crazy stories in here. Goes on inside, complete with ads. There's even a bit of a sports page at the back. It's just humor that only Jethro Tull could pull off. You know, I don't know if many Americans actually got some of the humor, but nevertheless it sold really well, so the music spoke volumes. And like I said, there were only 2 tracks, Thick as a Brick, which comes in at 22.45. Then there's a Thick as a Brick on the second side, 21.05, and that was the 2 tracks from the original album. On this anniversary edition, there's also Thick as a Brick live at Madison Square Garden in 1978, which is a great recording. And there's also an interview with Jethro Tull's Ian Anderson, Martin Barr, and Jeffrey Hammond, just talking about the album and the idea behind it, and who played what, and the tours and what have you. Really interesting interview. I don't think there's much else inside here. I think there's just a few photographs of newspaper ads and what have you, and there's some charts over there. So the music itself, Thick as a Brick, the first track starts off with like just Ian Anderson on the acoustic guitar, very slow acoustic beginning, and then it builds and builds, and there's a lot of keyboard work from John Evans. And Barrymore Barlow, as I said, on the drums was amazing. Jeffrey Hammond had actually not been a bass player. I think he was a guitarist. So he had sort of very quickly learned how to play the bass. And, you know, Tull's music is never easy at the best of times. So he had to learn pretty quickly for this album. Because, as I say, this had definite prog leanings, lots of time changes. And it's an album that you don't lose the attention. It grabs you from the beginning. And it's not something that you can play a little bit here, a little bit there. You've got to play from side 1 to side 2, right through, because it kind of tells a story. Great lyrics from Ian Anderson, of course, English humor. You know, he's a great lyricist, and it turns out to be one of their best-selling albums. It's one of my favorite Jethro Tulls. I've been lucky enough to catch these guys twice. They came to South Africa in '94, and this T-shirt that I'm wearing here, this was from the 2007 concert here in Cape Town. That wasn't as good as the first one. Ian had a bit of a hissy fit with some people in the crowd, and he walked off and came back eventually. There was no encore, and then he just left. That's Ian Anderson for you. But regardless, this is an album that you have to have in your collection. 50 years old Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick. A classic. I think along with Aqualung of the early 70s stuff, this is the one to get. So there we go, Jethro Tull, Thick as a Brick, short and sweet. Not too many tracks to talk about, but the 2 long tracks that are here are really worth delving into. You know, there's a lot on offer. So next time around, and I'll look at albums that are 50 years old, we're going to go back to the Rolling Stones, and possibly for me, their best album, Exile on Main Street. Have yourselves a great week, look after yourselves, and I'll catch you soon. Cheers.